Hello everyone, welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town. All right, Tyler Gould, another episode in the books, Richest Men in Town podcast. Tonight, we hung out with Stephen Lawson. Stephen Lawson is a mover and shaker in our world because he is the founder of the Monk Manual. Props to you. You found the Monk Manual first. You got me hooked on it. We've gotten a couple of our listeners hooked on it. What do you take away right now as you think about the time we just spent with Stephen?
Deep waters, man. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I mean, Stephen is he really has thought things out, and he really has put in some serious time and some energy into not just the Monk Manual, but into the way he thinks about life and the way that he approaches life. There was a lot of things tonight that I took away from our conversation. He talks about possibilities. He talks about life being beautiful. And then he spends just a few minutes of our conversation talking about love. And I thought some of the things he said about love were profound. So I had a blast tonight, Mike.
Yeah, I think of him living it, right? I mean, so we're familiar with his work, obviously, and that's what makes us interested in getting him on the show. But the fact is, he's walking in this, right? He's living this. He's a husband. He's a father, and really he's looking for things like peace and purpose and meaning, and the universal quest for meaning, I think, is really what drives him. And I think that's the appeal. I think that's the draw of a tool like a Monk Manual, right? And this is not a 2-hour commercial for the Monk Manual.
No,
Not
at all.
Commercial of living your life to the fullest. It is a 2-hour commercial of sucking the nectar out of life, because that's what Stephen's about, and that's what drives him. That intentionality. He talks about living a life trying to prove something versus living a life of service.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, I thought that was beautiful. Identity comes up.
Yeah.
And masks that we all wear. What would happen if we all just took off the masks? He gets into things, but he is a thinker. He's self-declared, right? He meditates on things. And as you meditate on things, you start to get into a little bit, like you said, deep water for sure.
Yeah. And, and I definitely, for our listeners, I don't want, as you said, this is not a commercial for the Monk Manual. I mean, this is an individual who is trying to live a life of meaning, right? And being true to the show, we want to be able to spend some time with people that are seeking after those things. One of the things that he says that is part of his purpose with the Monk Manual is peaceful being and purposeful doing. And I think
the being and doing, and the way he describes those axes, right? Like that idea of like the relationship between the doing and the being.
Yeah.
Now they go together, right? And it's kind of a symbiotic relationship where we do and we become.
Yeah.
And then he even gets into, as we can do some life hacks on the things that life requires us to do. There's even some ways to increase our ability to work out some muscles and some mental muscles, some spiritual muscles, so that we can become who we need to become.
Yeah, it's good stuff tonight. Good stuff.
Yeah. I can always tell the value of an episode by how long it bounces around in my head. And this one, Stephen's words are going to be bouncing around in my head a lot, especially the next time Kelly Freeman asked me to do the dishes.
Do them with love, man. Do it with love.
Do it with love. So to our guest, Stephen, thank you so much. That was a late night for him. I want to thank him. I want to thank his family. To the folks that tune into us, thank you for your support. Thank you for the text messages and the emails that you send to us on a regular basis, letting us know that our guests and their stories have made a difference. They've made an impact. I hope that we find impact in the words of Stephen Lawson. To everybody, let's do something with what Stephen gives us. It is a gift. So enjoy Stephen Lawson on this episode of The Richest Men in Town.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Yeah. How about them apples? 46.
46, man. You joined the club. It's a good club, man.
You know, I'm hearing things that are giving me hope these days.
I like that. What's giving you hope?
Oh, like the McDonald's guy didn't even open McDonald's till he was like 50.
Yeah, I mean, he stole it from somebody, but you know. No, yeah, that's true. Good things happen later in life, man.
Yeah, like the idea being that like Doc Holliday, right? I'm in my prime.
That's right. That's right. You can finally put all these lessons to use. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let's do something with it. Let's figure it out. Man. Yeah, I got a coworker. Shout out to Jeremy Sautel, a fan of the program, and he turned 32. And for a second, I kind of looked longingly and thought, 32, man. 32 was a good age.
That was a good age. It was a good age, man.
But I'll take 46. Honestly, I said that to him.
46 is a good age.
What? Nothing beats the season I'm in right now.
That's right. You know,
I may not say that 10 years from now, right? But it's a good season.
Yeah. I mean, it's
32. We were probably playing old man football at 32.
Oh yeah, we definitely were, man. Thinking
we were old men at the time.
That's funny, dude. I would still play football if the crew was still around. That's for sure.
Yeah, so. You know, I could sign myself up for some football. I think my performance, my strategy would probably be different. I'd be that savvy veteran.
Yeah, you got it. When you only have one functioning wheel, you got.
Yeah, or be like, hey, let me be your center this time.
You're that guy. I'm all-time center.
No, you can't do that. You can't.
No, you can't
play that card. We have an idea of who that person is, and we will fight that. We will fight
the end, man.
Till the end.
If I join a game, and they say, Tyler, why don't you do all-time center? Then I know it's over, man. It ended. I hung on too long, and that's just how it went down.
Yeah, there it went. Or basketball, like, hey, how about you sit over there in the corner and we'll pass it out to you, and maybe you can hit a corner three every once in a while. It's like, well, I don't want to be that. I'm not BJ. Is it BJ Armstrong?
BJ Armstrong? Was it BJ Armstrong?
Chicago Bulls?
There was a BJ Armstrong. I thought it was like Jim Paxson. Right? Wasn't Paxson the guy?
BJ Armstrong and Paxson, but yeah, BJ Armstrong was like the shooter. Just like, I'm going to stand here and you're going to pass it to me. I'm going to shoot it.
I mean, I think that was Steve Kerr's entire career, right?
You got 3 rings, right?
Yeah. It doesn't matter how you get them, right?
Doesn't matter.
You just hop on the bus.
Does it matter if you get them? Are you one of those guys where greatness is defined by championships?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate I appreciate longevity. You know, I appreciate consistency and longevity.
But longevity ends a lot of people up in Hall of Fames that really they were just around for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm coming from my boy, Steve Largent. My boy, Steve Largent went into the Hall when he retired. I think he owned all but one receiving record, but there was this young buck named Jerry Rice that was going to obliterate everything Steve Largent did. And Steve Largent probably took 20 years to do what Jerry did in 10.
That's true.
If you go to Joe Schmo on the street anywhere outside of Seattle and say, who's better, Jerry Rice or Steve Largent?
Oh, there's no question.
You go playground pick 'em, Jerry Rice is going to get picked every time.
Every time. Yeah.
I don't know. Hall of Fame is, I don't know. I struggle with that.
I mean, yeah, I got a lot of issues with the Hall of Fame. I mean, we already talked baseball Hall of Fame, man.
Let me just throw this out to you hypothetically. Would you rather be amazing for a year or good for 15?
Good for 15, man.
Oh, come on.
Name one guy that was amazing for a year.
Would you rather be
name the guy?
Bo Jackson, right? Would you rather be Bo Jackson
or Marcus Allen
or Marshall Faulk?
Well, look, man. I mean, Marshall Faulk is the guy. He's the man.
I jaded that one because I went to a Raider, right? Now you're all conflicted.
Yeah, I was very conflicted.
But I mean, I want to be the guy talking. I want to be. Well, I think of greatness. I think of the barbershop test, right? Jay-Z, Forever Young, like young punks talking about me in the barbershop.
I mean, Bo Jackson is an anomaly, you know. I mean, if you've been out of how long was his career?
Would you rather be Derrick Rose or Tim Duncan?
I mean, Tim Duncan, man, all day.
No way.
Yeah.
No way.
Tim Duncan, the big fundamental. I mean, the guy just all he did was win.
So vanilla, man. So vanilla.
Derrick Rose.
Hey, no kids in the park and no kids on the playground were mimicking Tim Duncan's moves.
I feel like there's some big man bias going on here, man.
Oh,
you know, I mean, look, Tim Duncan, he, like I said, longevity, dude, consistency. Derrick Rose, I mean, he was good. He was probably great for a year, blew out his knee, and then he's making a comeback, I guess. What, like 10 years later?
Yeah, I'm just saying, give me something that gets people out of their seat and like gets people like synapses firing. Like I've never seen anything like that. I'll take that over 15 years, 20 years of excellence. Tim Duncan is excellent. Tim Duncan is excellent, greatest ever.
Yeah.
Give me some flash, right? Give me some Charles Barkley spitting on people and like, I'm not a role model.
I do appreciate that a whole lot.
That's punk rock.
There is a lot. Look, I love Charles Barkley, man.
Is Tim Duncan punk rock? No,
Tim Duncan is he's Hall & Oates, man. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna pick the formula and I'm gonna master the formula and I'm gonna do it better than anybody's ever done. And there's something to be said for that. But come on, in your heart of hearts, Tyler Gould, you are punk rock.
I would love to be. Yeah, no, look, I agree with you 100%.
This is how hot take I am with this.
Okay, let's hear it.
I don't know if you remember Jeremy Lin in the peak of Linsanity.
I do.
I would take Jeremy Lin over Tim Duncan.
Oof. That's a stretch, dude.
But New York, Mecca, Madison Square Gardens, lighting it up, the world buying your jersey for a flash in the pan?
Yeah, look, New York was desperate, dude. They haven't been good for 30 years, man. The last time I saw New York do anything, Charles, was it Patrick Ewing dragging somebody around by his leg? Come on, man. Okay, they were good.
I'm immediately having regrets even having thrown that last one out. But I thought before, and I'm still with you, like, get people out of their seats.
Yeah.
Get people fired up and feeling some things maybe they haven't felt in a long time, over I'm going to be Mr. Dependable, reliable for a couple of decades.
But see, we could go back to the Jerry Rice. Okay. Jerry Rice, not exciting, really. I mean, so would you rather be Jerry Rice or would you rather be Chad Ochocinco?
Hold on.
There you go.
Hold on.
Ochocinco
Ochocinco is like,
do I
want to be
Odell
on
Beckham.
MTZ?
Odell Beckham, Jerry Rice or OBJ?
Okay, I got to bury my Niner hatred, right? Because I'm not. OBJ changed the game with that one catch. Every time kids are playing playground football, they're saying, "Oh, OBJ, it's a verb."
But OBJ is not going to go to the Hall of Fame.
No,
with that catch. I mean,
but where were you when you saw that catch?
Well, I love the catch.
Yeah, and you probably spit out your root beer, right?
I'm sure I've tried to recreate the catch. I know my son did a reenactment for me. I'm sure of it when we saw that catch, right? But yeah, I'm with you. I love the excitement. But
I'm a moment guy. I think I'm a moment guy, right? Like I'm a like to me, greatness is defined as like I'll be honest with you. I want to be memorable. Is that wrong?
I don't think that's wrong.
Right? I want people to be like, remember that time. Remember that time when Mike did that thing? Remember that time when this, remember, right? Like we to me, that's like connecting, right? To me, that's like, okay, I was here. That's what I want. I was here.
So are you seeking out those opportunities to be memorable?
I actually am.
Okay.
I actually am. So I had kind of an epiphany a while back. I was superintendent of a site. I was asked to talk about my job. It was like a career day, second grade class.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was super stoked because usually firemen get that.
Yeah.
Officers get that. School administrators never get that, right? We would have students of the month, and every time they talk about what they want to be when they grow up, and no one ever. School principals, right? No one ever did.
Yeah.
But I think that in preparation for what I was going to tell these second graders,
yeah,
I reframed my job, and I said that I was chief memory maker.
I like it. Right? Yeah.
That I was superintendent, but really I was chief memory maker.
Yeah.
You know, like, how do you learn math? It gets in your memory, right? It gets stuck in there. Or you're going to remember the time we did this together. You're going to remember these moments together. And I threw that out there. I still didn't think I did a good job selling the profession, because no second grader was like, oh yeah, I want to be a chief memory maker, right? But it helped me kind of reframe, like, this is the business you're in.
I like that, man. I like that a lot. Well, look, speaking of memory makers, right? So tonight we have Steve Lawson on the program with us.
And Steve Lawson's changing our world a little bit.
Yeah, right. I mean, you talk about making an impression and wanting people to say, hey, remember this. Well, I don't know if our listeners will be thinking the same way, but you and I selfishly, I think, are excited about having Steve on because of this. He is the creator of the Monk Manual, right?
Let's be real. We're going to geek out tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's going to be one of those nights, but that's okay. But I'm excited to talk to him because he's built something. He's put something together. He's put something together that not just fills a need for everyone else, but I think that Steve Lawson is searching. Steve Lawson is on a path to make himself different and to progress. And he's fashioned these tools and he's passing it on to everybody. And I admire that a whole lot. People who are builders, we've talked about this before. Mm-hmm. People who are builders, I admire that, man.
Well, and I would love to get that Genesis story, right? Like as we're talking to Steve, and it's like, this came out of something.
Yeah, absolutely.
When he creates this monk manual, and this monk manual scratches the itch that we have, it'd be curious to be like, hey, what did that look like? What space did that come out of? Like, I think of Quinn Lowry and creativity, and right, people, everyone's got the green light, everyone can create. He was in this place in his life where he's like, I need a tool that doesn't exist. I need to create this thing. And I'd love to get that story.
I agree. I don't think Steve Lawson's going to be the guy that tells us that he did it so he could be remembered, but we're going to remember Steve Lawson because of this thing, right? So why don't we kick the door open and let him in and find out where this all started?
Yeah. Let's throw that out. Maybe he's a huge Tim Duncan fan too, right? Who knows?
You never know. The people should be. That's what I'm saying.
Stephen Lawson, welcome to the richest man in town. How are you, brother?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
We're pretty fired up, Stephen. We're pretty fired up. We're fired up to have you on as a guest. We're pretty fired up for what you're doing for us as individuals, and we might be a little bit celebrity shell shocked, a little bit, have the chance to talk to you for a couple of hours.
Absolutely, man.
I can feel a lot of good energy, just like coming on the call. It's like I can feel it's like a little jazzed up,
Well, we're pretty excited,
man.
We got pretty fired up with some pre-show conversation.
Yeah.
And I don't know where you stand with sports, but it seems like Tyler and I are always kind of going to that world. But we talked about, we got into like greatness, and is greatness just, you're good for a really long time, or can you be freaking amazing for a flash in the pan, right? And what does that look like? And then we got into like, we got into me saying that I am trying to be memorable. Like, I think a great life is when I lay it down and I'm done, people can say for a couple of generations anyways, that I was here. Right. I think of Tyler, that guest that we had, our conversation with Aaron Hayes, right? Where in the old Jewish culture, there's two deaths. There's the one when you die, and then there's the last time someone mentions your name. That kind of gives me goosebumps. And so we were just talking a little bit about that, and of course that gets me riled up. So there's for sure.
So there's that, Steven. I think that, we were throwing around some different athletes is where we were going at the beginning of this. But I think that I asked Mike, I said, are you looking for opportunities to be memorable? And, and he said, yeah, I'm trying to find them, where I can find my spots where I can be memorable. So, I told Mike, I said, look, I don't know that Steven's thinking this way when he puts together the monk manual, but here we are, right? The genesis of this conversation tonight is because you've done some work, and Mike and I are all in on what you're doing. We're loving what you're doing.
And for the record, actually, and Stephen, I'm not joking, it is on record. Somewhere in our 50 plus episodes, Tyler gets on the show and starts talking about this thing that he came across, right? And I don't even know where he came across it, but it was like, yeah, I'm doing this thing. And you've been an unofficial sponsor of the richest men in town ever since, because then he started talking about it. I'm like, what is this thing? We get into the monk manual. Several listeners have gotten into the monk manual. And really, when we see what you're doing with that work, it just lines up so well with the purpose of our, of this little podcast project that we've got going on as a hobby. You're doing much more with it than, it's now changing lives probably all over the place. Now we're kind of all over the place too, Stephen. We're kind of a big deal. We are in Ireland representing hardcore. We closed down the pubs in Ireland. Right. This episode will drop at 6:00 Pacific Standard Time. For whatever reason, there's 35 downloads immediately at 2 a.m. in Ireland. So, we're not we're no small potatoes here.
We don't want to toot our own horn or anything, but we're a big deal in Ireland.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I don't have much of a following in Ireland, so this could be the thing that breaks it through. You know,
that's right. Yeah,
but it's one of my 5-year goals: break through to Ireland.
Well, hopefully we'll be a vehicle.
Yeah.
I love it.
But you know, hey, can I share something with you?
Sure.
And I haven't even shared this with Tyler yet. I'm just going to read something to you, and it has been rattling around in my head ever since I read it. Right? The book is Ryan Holiday. Ego is the enemy. Love Ryan Holiday. Stillness is the key. Obstacle is the way. I'm redoing the trilogy in kind of reverse order. I think that Ego is the Enemy was the first book. He talks about this guy named John Boyd. John Boyd was a colonel in the Air Force, never rose any higher, but he was a military advisor. The Air Force turned to John Boyd. They called him 42nd Boyd. In 40 seconds, he could look at any military situation and get the upper hand and win. So the military turned to him. He became an advisor, and he had this spiel that he would share with up and coming military leaders, like young bucks in the military. And this is what he would say. He'd say, hey, one day you're going to come to a fork in the road, and you're going to have to make a decision about which direction you want to go. He'd point one way and say, if you go that way, you can be somebody. You'll have to make compromises. You'll have to turn your back on your friends, but you will be a member of the club and you will get promoted and you will get good assignments. Or, points to the other direction, or you can go that way and you can do something. Be somebody, do something, right? Something for your country, for your Air Force, for yourself. If you decide you want to do something, you may not get promoted. You may not get the good assignments, and you certainly will not be a favorite of your superiors, but you won't have to compromise yourself. You'll be true to your friends and to yourself, and your work might just make a difference. To be somebody or to do something. In life, there's often a roll call. That's when you will have to make the decision. I can't stop thinking about that, right? I'm in the process of assuming a position. Someone in my organization is retiring, and I'm in the process of moving up, right? And I don't want to just move up. Not about a parking spot. It's about doing something, right? But like in life, we get sometimes we drink the Kool-Aid, or sometimes we fall into this temptation of stopping in doing the things that matter and just getting caught up in titles, right? In positions and not having impact. And I'm curious what that does to my two friends here on the call as you think about that conflict about being something, being somebody, and doing something. Tyler's going to be kind of weird.
I mean, if I could just throw something in, right? I'm doing this podcast right now. I actually was doing an interview with someone the hour before this, and I went with my mother to soccer practice for my son just before that. It's kind of just been this fast-paced last few hours, and I was telling my mom about the kind of what the next few hours look like for me, and she's like, "Oh, do you get nervous like doing those things?" And I told her, "No, not at all." And this is the reason why. I used to, 100%. I used to get really nervous about kind of going in front of people, about public speaking, about in some ways like putting myself out there. And the reason is, or kind of what I ended up realizing at a certain point was that the reason that I was nervous is because at the time I would be approaching those things and the focus was on me. You know what I'm saying? I'm nervous because I'm thinking, oh, what do people think about me? What am I doing? Like it's about me, right? Whereas recently, this has kind of been a like developmental step for me. And I want to say it's an honestly or a fairly recent thing. If what's actually dictating my action is not like a focus on self or self-preservation or this or that, but rather what is actually the way that I can make my life a gift to not necessarily even the most people, because I don't think it's always a game of one drop of water for 1 million people, right? It may just be 10 gallons of water for 100 people or whatever, right? I'm using some visual metaphors here. Or it might even just be like, you're going to go and build a well for one person, right? Like how that meaning actually, that impact changes dramatically based upon a lot of different things. But it's changed me because when I ended up, as I've kind of tried to make this switch into seeing things, it's like, all right, me going on this is not about me. It's not even about the monk manual, right? It's about like right now I'm in a position, can I do something good with it, right? And then I'm not afraid because what am I afraid of? All I'm doing is trying to do something good. You know what I mean? And that changes things. And I think that might be the difference between that dichotomy of the being and doing. The being is saying, I got to do something. I got to prove this. I got to, I never really felt totally secure with my relationship with my dad, but if I did this, even though he's maybe not around, that would really do something, right? That's probably an unconscious thing. And I'm just using that as like an example, right? There's a million different ways that can manifest, but I think the doing piece is more along the lines of, it's about service, right? Like at the end of the day, like all of our lives are like taken away, right? Everything passes. So like, is it passing to something meaningful, or is it just being, or are we just kind of squandering it ultimately, right? Now I feel like I'm really soapboxing. I guess that's part of what I'm here to do. But you kicked it off in a perfect way, because now I'm already.
I love that.
Tyler and I always say a good episode is us not talking.
Yeah. Amen. I love that thought process though, because when as you're reading that excerpt, Mike, from the book, I can't help but think, back to our conversation about longevity or flash in the pan, right? I just feel like those people that are less concerned about putting the focus on themselves and more concerned about building something, like, that doesn't have anything to do with them really. They're just doing it. Those are the people that excite me. Like I'm fascinated by that, and then if we go back to that idea of how do we define success, right? Because I think at the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot of things that maybe the world would tell us are the ways that we define success. The car that I drive, the neighborhood I live in, the house that I have, the whatever, right? We have all those kind of those markers. But man, when I talk to someone that's been married for, 50 years and they've raised kids that are doing great things, I'm like, now that's what I want to, dissect and look at. And as opposed to the guy that's got a 10,000 square foot home and living by himself, but has all of the.
But I think what you're saying there and listening to Stephen too is just like that to the listener. I hope they feel liberated, because that feels liberating when Stephen shares that I'm coming to this realization, because when I hear the word prove, when you can leave that one alone, when you can get to a point in your life where you're not trying to prove anything, right? Whether it's prove my parents, prove somebody wrong, prove somebody right. I will give you a little bit on proving somebody right, because we've talked about people believing in us.
Sure.
Right? And I think that there's some healthiness when I do what I'm doing I want to prove that teacher's faith in me was well placed. But everything else, man, think about, can you imagine if you were living your life and subconsciously or consciously, you were making decisions trying to prove something?
Well, and I love what you said, Stephen. I just love that idea of, I'm not nervous because it's not about me. I'm not trying to show something. I'm just here to, to talk about whatever it is, right? Something bigger than me. And to me, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I am curious though. I'm curious because that feels like it's swimming upstream. And I'm curious, Stephen, like how do you come to that realization? Right?
Oh,
What does that process look like? I mean, are you on a mountaintop somewhere, or or does your kid say, Dad, you're going to work again, right? You're going to work late again, and you're not going to be, like, how do you have that? And I think, honestly, it sounds like we're all in a similar place. And I think we could all kind of look at like lessons learned and be like,
sure.
Right.
The first thing that came to mind was just it. In some ways, it's like 1,000 deaths, like little deaths. And I don't even mean little deaths as in, oh, I'm going to not put the creamer in my coffee and I'm just going to sacrifice this little thing there. The thing is it's one thing to look at proving the ways we try and prove ourselves. And I think a person who actually is not trying to prove themselves at all is a very liberated person. And I think that most people, even there's a spectrum for sure, but I think it's very rare for someone to be totally free, right? Totally free there. But so we all,
Stephen Mitchell would call it the fly in the ointment.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? That little bit of like, no, there's some ego there.
Yeah. And so the thing is the ego can, and I've read that book, although it's been, I think a few years, I'm not sure exactly how he frames the ego, because the ego, the language of the ego, it's used in enough context that when someone says the ego, it can actually mean somewhat different things to different people. But when I think about it, I think of like, we're born, right? Like, we're all born. We enter into a family or some semblance of a family, right? Like, even if it's not like a traditional family, maybe someone's in an orphanage, right? There's still some semblance of family, right? They know there's some communal aspect, right? And we learn from a fairly early age certain ways to kind of maintain. We build an identity. We rebuild an identity again, usually around like 13 to 16. Now, it starts in that family, and then 13 to 60, it becomes this broader family, right? Of the kids at school, of this and that. There's this kind of redefining, and it's actually really interesting because the neuroplasticity of the brain is very similar in those two different age groups. But what ends up happening is we form, like my experience is, it's not just that the ego is like an abstract thing that like needs to be in any way like repressed or kind of subjugated or this or that. It's and it's not even the same as pride. It's actually how I come to understand myself. So there's an identity caught up in it. So the process of actually letting go, of no longer in some ways like buffeting yourself, right? Because the ego, as I'm thinking of it, in some ways is fairly close to, it's fairly close to the mask we built, right? We're all at this big party and it's your mask, right? And that's the thing that you feel comfortable in. And you've been in for a long time, right? So it's not like you even necessarily know, but you're pretty sure if you took off that mask, you'd look pretty goofy, right? Or you at least wouldn't fit in. People would be like, why do you look like that? I don't look like that. None of these people look like that. So why do you not want to look like everybody else? And actually going through the process of removing that is really, really painful. It's really painful. And I think the only reason people ultimately change or progress on that path. So what is it really when I'm saying like 1,000 deaths is it's like, I don't know, like you get to certain points where you're like, well, that's painful, but this is actually kind of more painful. Like or it's just not working, right? Like this is not sustainable, right? So I found myself, because I got really into the productivity stuff, right? Before the Monk Manual, for a long time, I was like, I was really, people would know me as kind of the like get stuff done strategy, fairly like works hard, works smart, does all these things, right? And I went like pretty far down that path, right? And I really was, there was a game, and I I mean, I'm not saying this out of arrogance. Like I felt like I was winning that game, and I can say that's not out of arrogance because I actually think any game's fairly easy to win if you get tunnel vision, right? Like if you wanted to go and bench 300 pounds and be able to run 10 miles and you're willing to go and like sacrifice weekends with your family and every night to be at the gym, like you could do that. Should you do that? Probably not. I'm not necessarily going to judge you for that. We just kind of met early, 15 minutes earlier, right? But so I'm in this position, really interested in the productivity, really interested in some ways of a certain model for success, right? Which I think, I can't speak for the experience of all humans throughout even like the modern era in the world, but like in the West, I mean, you are celebrated for being busy. You're celebrated for having like a quote unquote important job. You're celebrated for having the corner office. You're celebrated for, and in some ways, all the financial things are just signifiers. They're just symbolic things that point to like you're a higher quality person, and this money proves it on some level, right? So the thing is I'm in that type of position. I'm in, and I end up realizing like, man, I'm just not really that happy. Like I'm really like, this is not bringing me what I want, like what I actually feel like, if I'm being honest with myself. And this was kind of the primary points of honesty. Primary isn't foundational, right? It was one of the earlier points of, because the whole path around the Monk Manual, post Monk Manual launch has been kind of this ongoing, my personal path has just been an ongoing, like deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of like personal honesty, right? It is like that because we can't, it's like you can't, if you're in darkness, you can't just like turn the lights on too fast. Like your eyes will kind of get bloodshot or something, right? So we take the dimmer and we just keep on bringing it up a little more. Our eyes get to adjust, and it's that different where something that's like a dark room can really become illuminated. Your experience of life fundamentally changes, right? So I'm in this scenario and I'm thinking to myself, like, I realize, okay, the reason I'm interested in all these things is because maybe some of it's like trying to prove something, but like ultimately it's about like, I just want peace. Like, I just want peace. I want peace. I want meaning. And like what I'm doing is not actually creating that scenario, right? Like I'm not getting peace from doing this. And so I was really interested, and I saw this convergence. I like to think of it as like a Venn diagram where you have psychology, you have teachings from different spiritual traditions, you have best practices in productivity, and you see kind of this where they all overlap seem to be some core approaches to life, approaches to being in the world, approaches to also like doing in the world, right? Like how do you just do things, right? Because everything has a layer of being and doing. I don't see being and doing as two separate realities. They're like layers. It's like an axis, right? It's X and Y. So that dynamics is always playing out, and it's like there's I think like in some ways a model or a formula for living that level of human flourishing, and I saw it most predominantly being lived out in the life of monks, or seemingly like these people actually kind of have a system engineered around this thing, which to us seems so. I'm not saying to us because I can't speak on behalf of you guys, and I can't speak on behalf of most people, but I think that many people will find monks to seem alien. And I know people personally who will be like, I just don't really get being a monk actually seems kind of selfish, because like, what's the utility of a monk? I mean, there's some, like in the Buddhist tradition, there is a tradition of teaching, right? And there's a Benedictine or a Trappist monastery about an hour to the east of here that, I mean, they make bread. And they sell their bread and probably do some charitable stuff. So, I mean, they're giving to society, but it doesn't fit the mental model, right? And I also was so attracted because that was the power of those sorts of things is the fact that when like if everyone's wearing yellow, the one person who's wearing purple really, really stands out, right? So that's kind of what monks were for me as well, right? Where it's like, this is basically like all people, we have come up with an answer to some very deep questions that's manifested as our way of doing life and we just assume this is what you do, right?
Mhm.
But some people have not concluded the same way. And so that's really interesting to me. I went on a huge riff there that I just like, if you get me going, I will go. Like, I will just go.
Okay. I have a question though. Cause I love that. And I think that I mean, it's interesting because we live in a society where, you know, you talk about the corner office, you talk about, you know, kind of the trappings of how success is defined now. But I think there's a lot of people that are looking for that. You said, you know, I wanted peace. I was looking for meaning. And I think there's a lot of people looking for that, but I'm curious. I think maybe the struggle is letting go, and not saying like you quit your job, you walk out the door and you go to a monastery and there you are, right? But just letting go of sort of the gravitational pull that has on everyone and focusing on the things that are most important. So my question for you, Stephen, is what did that look like for you? I mean, you talk about kind of going down this rabbit hole of productivity and going down that path, but what was the thing that was a switch for you where you said, you know what, I've got to do things differently?
Yeah. You know, on one hand, I did feel like I was really lacking peace. Like I felt like I would be, I remember going to bed at night and I would just feel like my day was, I don't know, like I was working on like I wasn't working on Wall Street, but it felt like that, like just frenetic, where there was all this action, but still feeling kind of in some level of like a time deadedness, right? I think this is a fairly common feeling where people will go to bed and they'll be like, I don't know how I spent my time today. I feel like I'm tired. Like I worked hard, but I don't even know what the heck I did. Like, I just feel like I did a bunch of stuff. I'm not sure if it was the right thing. I'm not sure if it really made an impact. I just don't feel good about it. And I feel tired and I feel kind of in debt. And that's like that's a terrible thing when you're living this perpetual feeling of it, in some ways like a slavery to something, right? And so I think that was going on. I think that also I don't know, you know, it's like if you think of someone who's an alcoholic, and or it doesn't even have to be, sometimes you have to go and really feel out the edges of something. Like you have to go all the way to kind of the end of it until you can end up seeing like, okay, it's really clear now. This is not necessarily what I thought it was, you know? So I think that I was also reaching a point where I was so deep in, I was so invested. I'd put, by the choices of my life, I had said like this, I'm going to invest in a particular model of being of like where I place value, this and that. And then I was so deeply invested in that game that both my feet were in there. And it's like, at that point, I kind of like felt the full, it's like I put it on. Like I actually fully put it on, you know, and when I could do that, it wasn't theoretical. You know, I think that one of the things that's really, really fascinating is a lot of people think that being financially successful or like the CEO of a company is going to make them happy, right? The people who don't generally think that are the people who have a lot of money, who are the CEOs of companies, right? What I mean by that is the thing is, it's like there's a lot of stuff that looks really great from like a distance, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the benefits you have from actually achieving that, what you're setting out to do, like say, for example, you're like a high school guy and you're like, oh, I just, you know, high school guys, they got all these hormones going on. They want to just like, everything's about like women, right? Often, right? Like I want to go and have a relationship. And they think having this relationship is going to make them like happy. And the thing is like, that's probably going to stick with them for a long time until they have that relationship. And then they realize like, actually this relationship has some problems it brings with it too. And it actually didn't resolve the thing I thought it was going to resolve. This was actually maybe about something else entirely. Right. And that's one of the fruits. So I think that's what was going on for me, is I was starting to realize that the questions I was asking were maybe the right questions, but I was answering them the wrong way. But I had to live through that answer in order to know that.
Yeah. I love that.
You know, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of that John Lennon quote, right? He grows up and his mom's always teaching him hey, John, you want to be happy, right? You want to be happy. And then he goes to school and they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he says, I want to be happy. And they're like, no, John, you didn't understand the question. And he's like, you don't understand life, right? And I think that so many times the thing that people want that they think is going to make them happy, and it really gets into like what we're about, right? George Bailey, nothing changes about George Bailey's life, and yet everything changes because his perspective changes. And there's this, I'll even throw this out there, that there is this thing that for whatever reason, our culture perpetuates this myth that success equals healthy, success equals happy, you know, and it's clear that that's not the case, right? And I think that, you know, I'm even thinking of like recently the U.S. Open tennis champion, right? Naomi Osaka pulls out of the U.S. Open claiming she's got to work on her mental health. You know, and people are like, what are you talking about? You're a champ, you're a millionaire, you got all this stuff. And she's like, I'm not well. And I've got to put some priority on that. And, you know, it's almost like you get to this place where it's like, this path was supposed to give me peace. And I don't feel peace. You know, and we talk about the courage to even have that conversation, the courage to listen to the self. Because honestly, one of the things that I appreciate from monks, I haven't hung out with a lot of monks, but like the idea is that isolation and the chance that they have to be in tune with themselves. You know, in our lives, we have a lot of noisemakers, you know, and we've talked before about that noise is intentionally designed to kind of shut out the selves. So that we're listening to ourselves. The self knows, but you could fill your life with enough noise that you don't even realize you don't feel peace.
Well, and also just not to take this on too much of a tangent, but I do think this is important as well. As part of this aligns with the original question of kind of what's been my path, or what's had to happen to get to that realization of it not necessarily being about me. I've come to strongly believe that most of the noise in our lives, individually, culturally, really has to do with a tremendous fear of suffering. We just really are afraid of suffering, right? There's a lot of reasons for that. And I can speak more to that, but what you see in the East and the West, and I think the reason that some of the fruits of monasticism come to bear is because both are actually directed or intentionally create space to integrate suffering into one's experience of being human, right? So in the East, there is this overtone of kind of a cessation of suffering, but there's an acceptance of impermanence, of realizing that things pass away, and then in the West, predominantly in like a Christian tradition, there's a real emphasis on the fact that life is suffering, that there can be a redemptive quality to suffering, that suffering is not necessarily a wholesale bad, that there is kind of light that can come through darker things that happen in one's life. And I had heard one person once describe that actually to understand like monasticism is it's pretty much just a system designed to prepare someone to die. It's just one really long process, just trying to, because it makes sense even then, like you get rid of all this stuff. It's like, well, you're going to have to get rid of it anyways. So why not do it sooner and just free yourself all the more, right? It's just one long preparation for death. And I don't know. I'm not like a really dark, morbid person. But I guess I'd say I'm like a light morbid person. Like I think about, and this is kind of becoming a bigger thing with Stoicism really on the rise, but Like, I mean, I find even just thinking about death to be like immensely liberating. Like it's something that is, like I want as much of my, I want to drive as many decisions as I can now based upon how I'm going to view them at the end of my life. Right. Because I mean, what a gift, first of all, like what a gift if I at like a younger age can come to ultimately like some level of wisdom, right? In an early age. I mean, I have very limited time resources, right? My life is going to go by very quickly, right? Back to the whole, like remembering, like the memory thing, right?
Yeah.
It's going to go by really quickly. And I want to do what I can with it. Right.
Well, you talked earlier about squandering.
Yeah.
You know, and the idea of we're given this and how sad would it be if we squandered it?
Yeah. Yeah. But one other quick like caveat on that is when that emphasis, when you become aware of your own mortality, you become aware of the finitude of life. The first reaction or impulse, I think, for most people is to preserve. It's to self-preserve. It's to go and prove. It's to go and say, I need to go and make sure I can kind of get what I need out of this, right? Which actually ultimately produces anxiety, right? Because it's almost like this feeling of like the walls closing in, right? But like an image I'll actually use is like, I don't think of an hourglass. Like, I think this is really it's interesting to me, maybe not to you guys, but if you think of an hourglass, the model we usually think of is these grains of sand kind of like dropping, right? So what's all caught up in that? It's this image of like life is kind of passing by. It's this fleeting thing where slowly like these things are departing. I think what's really almost what I relate to more is to think of the sand actually being on the bottom and slowly it fills up the upper chamber, right? So every single moment of our life is this pregnant moment with possibility. You know, it's always going to be what it is, right? Like this moment right now is the only moment of this I will ever have, right? I only have so many moments, and this is how I'm living one, right? Right now, whoever's listening, I mean, this right now is how you're spending this moment, right? And there's a potential to that, and it's actually it's an eternal potential. There's this guy Joseph Campbell who has he's a comparative mythologist, and he talks about how people will think of like heaven and be like, oh, that's eternal life. And he's like, no, that's not eternal. He's like, that's everlasting. Everlasting keeps on going on. The moment that you're in at every moment is eternal because it's the only moment that's going to exist, right? It's like what you're doing right now at every single moment is the only time that's ever going to occur. Ever. And this is the thing. I actually struggle with gratitude. I'm the monk guy, but I don't naturally feel gratitude.
We struggle with that section too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean to understand the monk manual, it's basically like my crutches, right? I mean, really, like I built the thing for my own weaknesses, right? But I think they're common weaknesses, which is I think why it's got applicability. The time, I mean, there's times where I'll have glimpses of just like spontaneous gratitude. I mean, that certainly happens, especially with my kids. The deepest gratitude I've felt probably in the last, besides like the birth of my kids, just not even spontaneous, but like I felt this and it was so deeply meaningful for me. I was sitting there and I do some like meditation type work and I'm sitting there and I'm kind of just, I'm kind of just like really trying to experience like the present. And what occurred to me was that, I was hearing some music in the kitchen and I heard like my kids like laughing or doing something. And I'm actually able to place this, right? Where it's like, there's kind of this cascading soundscape going on. And here I am. And I have this orientation, like I'm in this space, I'm experiencing this thing. And it occurred to me that I would be the only person in the history of the world to ever experience that exact thing, right? Mm. And that just filled me with so much tremendous gratitude. Like right now, I'm the only person who will ever experience, I mean, we're all experiencing this call. You're not experiencing it like I am. Tyler's not experiencing it like I am. But we're the only people who will ever be able to experience that particular thing, right? And that's really profound, right? Because then you have something that's a very short thing like our life, but filled with all these moments that are extremely, extremely unique. And then when they can be transformed into an additional layer of gift, man, it's like, how rich is that? Right? I didn't even intentionally just say the word rich because that's time for the podcast. I really didn't, but there you go.
Well, just thinking of pregnant. What did you say? Pregnant with potential, right? Pregnant with possibility. I think that it makes me think of. So Michael Hyatt had a book called Living Forward, and and the idea is start with your funeral. Literally, I read the book and it was like, okay, you get to a certain point in the book, it's like, take a day off, take a legal pad, go off in the woods or go off wherever you can be by yourself and start with your funeral. What are your friends saying about you? What do you want your friends to be saying about you? What do you want your mom to be saying about you? Right? And then the idea is be that friend, be that son, that coworker, and then go and take full advantage of the moments that are presented, and it's a beautiful thing. Like, I think you're right. I mean, so many thoughts about what you've shared, but like that I think about my own mortality. I know where I'll be, right? I'm going to be in my church building and I'm going to be in a box and my family will be there and my friends will be there. And they'll walk by and maybe they'll view me and they'll say some things. In my mind, I've kind of done that exercise. And so it's like, okay, what are they saying? And Covey would say, beginning with the end in mind, and we've got an end.
I just love that idea though of, Stephen, for a guy that's not the best at gratitude, I mean, you paint this picture of the hourglass, and as you're talking about it, I'm like extremely grateful just listening to that, because I just think to be able to sort of disconnect from the outcome, the expected outcomes of everything, right? And find some kind of joy in the moment. I love that idea. I don't know how, I'm not great at it. I'm not good at it at all. As a matter of fact, I'm working on it. But I do love that idea of just being able to I like how you talked about, this is it, right? I'm meditating. I hear my children laughing, and I'm the only one that's going to experience this. I mean, there's some power there to be able to disconnect from outcomes that maybe society says we have to hit, and just be caught up in the finite, the smallest of moments, Mike, and say, gosh, it's
presence, right?
It's
presence.
Like,
it's
to me,
intentionality.
it seems like the definition of, right?
Yeah, it's intentionality, it's presence. But I think of, like, when you said that hourglass image creates anxiety. I think of my son playing sports. If you're playing afraid, if you're playing anxious, you're done, right? Why even be on the court? And like, if we're going through life and we're feeling anxious, trying to grab, I remember, Tyler, we had a conversation a while back and you were just like, life is moving so fast and I'm just trying to get a grip.
Yeah.
And we kind of changed as we had that conversation. We kind of shifted to, maybe it's a current.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not about trying to grip a river. Maybe it's just trying to jump in, and ride, right? Maybe it's a wave and we're,
enjoy it.
Like, I'm trying to grab these moments that I know are falling through an hourglass. I think that creates some angst and some anxiety, and I'm just not going to live a present life if I'm afraid. If I'm not going to be able to be present if I'm in a state of anxiety.
Well, and I love the imagery of, right, we're watching the sand slip through the hourglass, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're losing this. Right. But then the flip side of that is, look at what has been created. The moments that we've had, the moments that we're experiencing now. I mean, that's a hard, it
goes back.
I love talking about it, but I'm terrible at it, man. Like,
I know, but
I was telling you, like, look, the battle for me, honestly, and when I sit down in the evening with my book, right, and I'm staring at that section of gratitude, I really am trying to find I'm trying to dig well below the surface, and find the things that are meaningful, that maybe I wouldn't have found meaning in before.
But I know, but here's the thing that we're always up against, right? If you were told in 2 minutes, you're done, like game over, you'd be able to crank out a list.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and it's like, we're in this thing and there's this myth that this thing is going to go on in perpetuity. And it's like, no, it's not. And like, I think of like at the end of For Whom the Bell Tolls, right? I can't remember the main character, but he's dying, and he's dying on the battlefield, and he's grabbing for, he's grabbing for the grass, he's grabbing for the leaves, and he's just trying to be like, he's just trying to grab everything that mortality, you know, everything that represents mortality around him on his way to die,
on his way out.
Yeah. And it's like, how can we live that way? And
well, I got to tell you, so the other day, I was having
how can you live like you're dying? How can you live like you just got diagnosed? Right? We have that conversation all the time.
Like, I actually had this conversation the other day with a friend of mine who has cancer, and he's going through all kinds of treatments. And he'd gone through treatments before. You know, the cancer is gone. 6 months later, it's back, right? And now it's really aggressive. I was talking to him the other day, and he said, you know, the other day I was sitting in the office, doctor's office, getting treatments, you know, and this 14-year-old girl goes walking by. You know, he's like, she's a beautiful girl. And she walks by, and her dad's behind her with this vial of medicine, you know, and it's pumping through her. And he said, I'm 51, man. It's been a good life. You know, it's been a good life. I've been blessed to be 51 years. I mean, that's a big deal, right? So now there you go. And I said, but hey, it's, you know, you're making progress. He said, Tyler, it's terminal. It's a question of 2 years or 4 years. This is where I'm at. So I've got 51 today, and it's been good. So the question is, back to your point, Mike, is how do you get to yourself to that point without having the diagnosis, right? And I think, Stephen, you talk about that, the ability to find joy or find peace in the smallest of the moments.
Man,
what if I like stuff? What if I just like stuff? What if I really like to have these things, and how can I have this monk mentality and still keep my stuff, right? I think that's one of the things that the monk manual addresses. We're not saying go sell it all.
Man. So I'm listening right now to one of those great courses. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to a great course. Like I use Audible, right? I don't have, I will read print books, but I often find I can work through audiobooks faster. So I'm listening to this one right now on like the history of meaning, or like basically meaning in all the great traditions, right? And they do an exposition of the book of Job from the Old Testament. And it was really interesting because there's I don't know if essentially, like, the book of Job is about a guy who's a really good guy. He's like the best guy, actually. And he's also like in the context, like Warren Buffett, basically, of like the Old Testament. Like he's super rich, but he's also like super virtuous. Like he's just like the best guy. Right. And God and the devil, like kind of are at a picnic table or something, I don't know, and they're chatting, and
it's a weird exchange.
And the devil's like, hey, you know what, like I see your boy Job, I see what he does. Yeah, he's a pretty good guy, but you do understand that he's only a good guy because he's got all this stuff, right? I mean, anybody would probably be a good guy if like they were really blessed that way, right? So God's like, all right, like prove to me that like that's the case, right? And so this whole thing goes on where Job loses pretty much like everything, right? And then ends up getting all these sores on his body. And all that's just context for people who might not be familiar with the story. Where what ends up happening is, like, at one part, one of the arguments that one of his friends starts making, or no, they're making all these arguments trying to basically say like, well, this is why this could happen, or like they're trying to, in a sense, like justify God's action, right?
Right.
And then one of the things that comes back is like, and I don't remember if this is the God who says this, or if it's if it's like the young guy who shows up, but there's an interchange where it's like, who are you to be judging God, right? Like just the actual act of saying like, you're going to basically hold trial over the action of that which is so much larger than you. Like the level of hubris to that is astounding, right?
Right.
And so what's really interesting is it's like when we think about life, right? It is this sort of thing where it's like we can feel often a sense of like loss. We have this weird relationship, I think, with life itself, because on one hand, we're very aware, we feel this sense of loss or like urgency, or like, I gotta go and get this and like figure all this stuff out, right? But then we're also like, yeah, but I'm also not even really experiencing like life that's there. Like I want to prolong life, but also I'm not even really experiencing life. And like, I don't really know like what to do with all this. And we're just kind of all like running around in circles to greater or lesser extents, right? And what's like really interesting is like on some level, when you really, really zoom out, it's like, you didn't even have to exist, right? Like on the most basic level, like you exist, right? You didn't earn that. I mean, why do you exist? Like you didn't, like there's no reason, there's nothing you did to make you exist, right? I mean, if I knew I could exist for 8 years, would I want that? Yeah, I would. You know, rather than not existing? Yeah, every day. I take that every day. But that's not to be glib, to downplay the darkness and suffering that people go through, right? It's just to say that, like, I don't know, maybe that's something that also brings up some level of like spontaneous, like gratitude. It's like, man, I don't, there's nothing I've done to be here, right? I mean, and even beyond that, like just to look at myself, right? Like I have so much. I really do. I don't have the most. Like relative, right? There's a scale for things. I could weigh myself against different scales and be like, you know what, my calves just aren't really that muscular. Like a lot of other guys have like nicer calves. You know what I mean? I could do that for everything, right?
Right.
But relatively, it's like I'm doing really well. But the area I'm doing the most is the fact that I exist. And I didn't have to exist. And yet I did. And then that existence, and this is the thing that I think it's really like trippy. It's trippy for me. When I stop, and I've had moments where I really experience life, like really experience it. I found it for me, and I think there's reasons for this, but I find it's happened the most probably with my kids. I think sometimes people experience it. Maybe they experience it through some sort of spiritual practice. Maybe they experience it with like a nature, something where it's almost like the veil seems to be lifted a bit, and you just see this like raw beauty of like existence, of life. And I'll see that, like I'll sometimes have that with my kids, and it's like, man, it's actually almost like too much for me to take. Like it's like, it's so beautiful that it's like so beautiful and so meaningful, just not because they're doing something, not because they're even giving me a hug. I just see it. Like I'm seeing what it actually is. I'm seeing this moment that's like, man, I'm here and this is what's happening. And this is really good. And it's painful in some ways. And I don't know if like that wounding that happens is because it's fleeting. I do sense that's what it is for me. It's like, man, you see that grain and you see that grain is so good. And it's like, man, but it's so good. But it's like the nature of our lives is that it's impermanent, right? And I know I'm going off on a riff, but I want to share one other thing is it's like, I thought that I had taken this from Shakespeare, but I think I maybe just made this up. That life is, I know Shakespeare says like life is a play, right? But right. I actually have viewed it as like life in many ways is like the idea of life is beautiful, right? It's not like one person's life is beautiful. It's like life is actually like beautiful. Like the actual experience of life is beautiful. And the additional layer to that is like like I might be in the same play. Let's imagine that life is like a giant play, one giant play. Like I might be playing the role of king. You might be playing the role of, I don't know, like knight or wench. I don't know, whatever it is in the wedge 3. I don't know.
Right.
You might be playing these different. We're all playing like different roles, right? But like when you actually zoom out in that play analogy, it's like the ego kind of fades away, because it's like you don't go and think, oh, like look, that person's like the king. Like people don't watch, like in a play, that doesn't actually matter. It's how well you play the role you're given, and it's about actually just like being on scene, right? Like being tuned in, like doing what you have to do really well, and enjoying the fact that like it's a beautiful thing. There's an artistry to it. There's a being and becoming in the moment, and there's something just so dynamic about the whole thing. Like we get caught up in like, well, you know what, that guy's like, he's the king and he's got like 3 more lines. It's like that doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And if there was an audience, like it wouldn't really matter to them either if they saw like the whole thing. So it's like I that's consoling on some level, because it's like that it just doesn't matter. And even more than it not really mattering, it's also like you can't control, there's only some things you can control, right? And I do think we often can't control that heavily the quantitative aspect of our life. There's things we can do. We can try and tend to our health, but there's plenty of people who never smoke and still get cancer, lung cancer at 40 or whatever, right? And car accidents happen all the time. You know, we can control the qualitative aspect. Like we can control the fact that every single moment, like that's ours. It's ours. We don't know how many of those ours there's going to be, but we know that at least we have this right now, you know, and we can start there. I get so fired up, man.
No, I love that. I love the idea of every single moment is ours. I think there's a lot of freedom that comes with the application of that, right? Where we can sort of disconnect from some other things and say every moment is my moment. I think and that's a beautiful thought. I guess the challenge is not allowing life to sort of wash over us in a way that it becomes overwhelming. I don't know if that's the right word, right? Or it becomes distracting, or where it becomes, I don't know. I think that's, and honestly, going back to, and I want to touch on a couple things that you said earlier too, but, I think that maybe to be able to say with excitement that every single moment is ours takes a lot of intentionality, right? To be able to sort of step back for a second and say, this is a beautiful thing. I don't know. I want, Stephen, I want that. I'm working on that. I mean, that's the pursuit, right? But I'm trying to see how to manage the distractions would be the strategy at this point in my life.
Can I throw out one thing really quick?
Yeah.
Because this is like a practical step that I actually had to go through that might be helpful. Because I hear what you're saying, right? And one of the things is like anytime we all have some level of what's it called? Like memory loss, right? Like when you progress, like my experience of life is different than it was 6 years ago. And I don't know, it's like we forget what it's like being in different scenarios. We project into certain people's life circumstances as it being similar to ours. And I want to avoid it. But my looking at my own path, I do think that there's been a lot of it has been marked. Like my growth often has been marked by kind of a cycle, like a cycle of letting go and trusting, right? Like trusting the process of life that's taking place. And one of the practices that was really helpful for me, and I actually now have this as a daily practice. I do this every single day. I mean, I spent a good amount of time, probably over an hour, like really thinking about like what am I holding on to right now that I'm afraid of letting go of? And then I just kind of went through and I just let go of it. And the thing is, it's like that that doesn't that might sound like I'm going and writing a note and like kind of putting it in like a little ship and putting it out to the water and then like singing a song and blowing through a conch shell or something. That's not what it was like. It was like what I mean by that is I my experience. I think there's a fear that it's like if we don't cling to things or try and control everything, that everything's just going to fall apart.
Right.
I don't think that's true. I actually think that we self-sabotage all the time. In letting go does not mean you're not taking responsibility. It means that you're not going to try and control things that you can't control. You're just going to try and do what you can all the time. And I actually think it frees up a lot of mental energy and you end up doing better because it takes a lot of mental energy to try and like hold everything in all the time and rein everything in and make everything kind of like perfect and do everything, especially like, I don't know you guys super well, right? But just the nature of what you're doing, like you're probably fairly self-critical people. I don't mean that as a criticism. Like I'm a self-critical person, right? Most high performers are, right? Like the books you're listening, this and that, like you're people who want to push yourself, right? And so there's the strength, but there's also the shadow weakness of that, right? There's the other side of it. And I think that for people like that, letting go is really hard, right? But I don't think that it actually ends up producing the negative impact. So the practical thing, it might be to just sit back and say like, it's like you're looking at like a ledge and you're like, yeah, like it looks cool up there, but like, how do I get up on that ledge? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, no, I totally agree because I think that the nature of the conversations that we have here on this show, I think are that, right? How do we get past that ledge and push ourselves to the next level of whatever it is that we're looking for? I mean, I think that, you talked about trying to control things, right? And letting go of that. I think there's a lot of self-importance that is attached to that also, right? When we say, well, I have to do this, or I have to control that. I like the idea of being more intentional about progression in my life. And I think that the monk manual resonated with me, and Mike, I don't know, you can speak to that as well, in just that sort of prescriptive way of being able to forcing yourself, not forcing, but being able to be more intentional, right? Looking at something and saying, okay, these are things that are important to me. Now, how do I delete some of this noise or some of these distractions and just be able to focus on those things that are most important? How do I enjoy and recognize that every single moment is mine? Right?
Yeah, I see myself almost like, go with me on this. I don't even know if this is going to work, but like almost like a naturalist, right? You're going around and you're labeling things. And I think sometimes we have life that is passing us by and we're not stopping and saying, yeah, it's happiness, or stopping and saying, right here, this thing is suffering, or this thing is teaching me something, right? And I think that it would be awful. It would be awful I think it's about lenses that we put on and we see life through. And there are people walking through this life, this beautiful life. I agree with you. Life is beautiful. Now, that being said, that has been tested. And I think each of us can go around and can share moments where our theory that life is beautiful has been tested. But the crazy thing about it is some of my most beautiful moments were in the middle of that trial, and I'm removed from it. And some people are putting on glasses, and we've talked to people in rough situations, right? And we've asked, why didn't you raise a fist and just curse God and die? Right? Like I think that was one of the buddies, right?
Yeah.
Die, man, you got it bad. You know, and I think that I think when you were talking about, I'll take 8 years, that's a rare perspective, right? like today's my birthday, right? I'm 46 years old. It would be, who am I to say I'm entitled to 92, right? And I don't know. I mean, I can go on the play idea, right? Because do I have a script? Can I take the script and toss it and be like, I don't want those lines. I want to do something else, right? I mean, I think that, I can go a lot of different places. And then when you were talking about that idea of like, you know, you have those moments and you talked about that veil being thin. I wonder sometimes what that is, because we've all felt those things. I actually call it, you know, HD back in the day when HD was like cutting edge. So now it'd be like, you know, where everything is like, oh my, everything is gilded. Everything is clear. And like you walk outside and it's almost like I'm in a Disney movie and the birds are chirping, the sun is shining. I'm like, what is going on? You know, sometimes I wonder to myself, can I live with tools like Monk Manual in a way that I'm able to recreate those moments? Mm-hmm. Can I do something to live and put on those glasses to be able to see that life? But you mentioned hubris. I think a lot of people would say Mike Freeman's full of hubris, right? Mike Freeman is full of this talk and, you know, pride and I am, but I'm trying to figure this thing out, right? Because I don't want to hang it up and be like, that life thing, I thought it'd be more beautiful. No, that's not going to happen. That will not happen, right? And I think I demand of myself. I demand of myself some high expectations, right? By golly, I'm holding the pen and I'm labeling my moments, and I think it's important that we call it what it is and say thank you for that, right? And whatever that looks like. But I'm with you. I mean, I'm even relating to your productivity, because I've fallen into that trap, right? I'm into you name it. I've probably read that book, right? But those things are contrived, and really it comes down to, when you mention meditation, right? Really it comes down to like, what am I doing to be present now? And maybe even throw the checklist out. Can you imagine living a life without a checklist? I asked the guy who comes up with the Monk Manual, like that would kind of be bad for business, right? If there was no checklist. But to be present in such a way where it's like, I know what I need to do, right? Because I've listened to myself in the morning, and I'm going to go do these things, like you highlight in the book, right? I mean, those priorities.
Yeah, I think it's about finding, for me, I think it's about awareness, right? And you talk about, Mike, you know, seeing those moments, you know, and trying to capitalize or maximize those. I think that's the trick, right? And I think that's the search. And I think for a lot of our listeners, I think that's the search. Like, how do we know we're in the middle of it, right? Life is life. There's no escaping the day-to-day of whether it's your work or health issues or whatever the thing is that's in your path. The trick, or the thing that everyone's searching for, I think, is to how to be more aware of the beauty of life in the middle of life, right? Because as much as I would love to maybe just go to a secluded beach and have my time there, right? That's not reality. But I think that if we can find a way to be more in tune with the beauty of life, I think that's what we're searching for. That's what I'm searching for. That's what our listeners certainly are searching for. So yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, to me too, it's like I owe it to that me. I owe it to that me. I mean, I honestly believe that there's a Mike Freeman out there that I need to be. I owe it to the people that love me. I owe it to the people that rely on me. And some days I crush it. And some days not, some days not so much. But I mean, I think that having the work that Stephen's involved with Monk Manual helps me kind of clear out that whirlwind. Right?
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
And say,
that's it.
This whirlwind of things that we've all got 24 hours.
Right.
Jump on and take a free MIT course right now. You can learn anything, right? But in that whirlwind, there's a couple of essential things. What are those essential things? And that's what I need to be about. And I think that degree of, I think of Greg McKeown and essentialism and disciplined pursuit of less, and like, okay, that's what I need to be about, right? And we talked last week, Tyler, about core values. Can you imagine wasting your time, squandering your time, and none of it was lined up with your core values? Like Stephen was saying, I go home, it's like, what did I do today?
Yeah, right.
String enough of those days together, and that's a recipe for misery.
Right. Things can get dark pretty quick. I'm
with you. I'm with you looking out there, Stephen, on the high dive saying, yeah, go for it, brother, jump.
So I a couple of things I just want to throw out because I do think I can be somewhat theoretical, and I think there's often a need for me to try and offer some like actual practical steps around things. So the first thing is, I do believe that most things in life are iterative, right? There are moments of sheer like transformation, right? Often those are very dramatic moments, right? Your plane is going to go down. You might have like a very life-changing experience around values, around all these different things, right? You maybe have the loss of someone you love, very profound change can come about in a very short amount of time. But most of the time, the change doesn't happen in that way. It is like iterative, right? So the idea behind the Monk Manual, largely, to understand the Monk Manual is like there's assumptions behind it. And one of the assumptions is that there is a process to life and that we can trust that process. That like all the material we need is actually there. And it's actually working towards our good, and that over time, if we pay attention and just like we are not actually having to go and generate some scenario where we finally can go and like operate. We actually can always operate, and there's always the opportunity to kind of move to the next level if we can pay attention, if we can see the signs, if we can just like even if every day you're asking a question around like, when did I feel unrest? You end up recognizing patterns. You end up seeing certain things. You become more and more conscious of your external and internal reality, which then as your thinking changes, your behavior in turn can change. The other piece, which I think might be helpful is, so there's this, there is like a transcendent value that I was trying to touch on, and I'm using the word beauty, but it's not even just like that's probably the best way to describe it. But there's something that you feel that it's like, man, there's like a richness, a depth, something here that's like, so I love the word that they use, saying like gilded, right? Like it's it's almost like if you're in your maybe normally life can feel like you're in a fog. Or maybe it's not even the most dense fog, right? But it's like, I don't know, if you start like you burn an egg and there's some smoke in the kitchen, right? It's like we live, I think, actually in that frame of reference. And then when it's completely clear, you're like, oh, this is kind of nice. You know what I mean? It's a little bit brighter in here. Like I can see all these things really clearly. It just feels more true to something, right? So there is that level to like all of our doing, right? Or there is that level to like, when I say doing, I'm thinking of like our action in the world, right? Because when I think of being is kind of almost like that qualitative aspect. It's not, it's not totally analogous, but are doing, like we can't help but be in the world. So when you were talking about when you were talking about maybe not having a checklist at all, this is not like a product placement thing, because I actually don't. I really am operating out of like, how can I make the most impact? So I'm not, whether people think the monk manual is right for them or not, like that's up to them. But I do. I actually am not of the opinion that I think that a checklist or having an order and applying yourself to meaningful work every day is actually extremely important, because it's not like I think it's actually really broken to think of being and doing as like two separate functions. Like I'm going to go and I'm going to work real hard and do all this stuff, and then I'm going to go and like once a year I'll do a retreat, right? Sometimes those things are actually good. Like there is a place for more specifically like being oriented activities. But I actually think that like when you're doing things really well, you're also positively impacting your being. And when you're being really well, you're also positively impacting your doing, right? So there's this qualitative presence level to all of our doing that we can think about, right? So this is like a pretty practical thing. It's like every day, like you're going through the actions you're going through, whatever your job is. You're a garbage man, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're whatever. You're going to have different things that your tasks of life every day, right? It might be for me taking out the garbage. It might be washing dishes. It might be writing an email. It might be doing this. Like this is a very unique part of my task of life, right? But it is a task nonetheless. And there's one level that you can kind of enhance that material that's already there, which is providing this means of being and becoming, is to say, okay, like I'm going to start really trying to pay attention to like, am I really there? Like, am I really present, right? Or am I just missing it, right? Is it just like I'm in a car going real fast and all the scenery is like flying by because I'm racing to somewhere? I'm not really sure how, but I'll pull off tonight and get a few hours of sleep to get back on the road, right? Like, am I actually present? And the reason, like, the presence is not just like, oh, I'm going to go and like take all this in and like it's just going to be like looking at a sunset. It's actually immensely practical, because if you're not really present, what our brains, if it say it has 100 units of energy, you think of a computer, right? It's like when you're present, your energy, your creative focus and potential is centered on the thing that's right there, right? And isn't that what you ultimately want? Like, won't you be a better worker at whatever you do if you're actually focused on what you're doing? And also that's the only way that like a flow state's really possible, is like if you're engrossed, right? If it's actually like a form of play, to be honest. And that's deeply enriching in and of itself. The other piece, and this is what I get like really excited about, because this is where I like, there's so much potential, right? That it's just like, it's right there. Every single action we have has this, I would relate this to the becoming aspect, where it's like every single action we have or undertake also has this additional layer of being able to be a means to growth. And what I mean by that is everything we do, we can also simultaneously be like flexing a muscle or using it as like a workout, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples. Something I'll regularly do is like I don't naturally find washing the dishes to be particularly meaningful. I'm kind of a big picture guy, and I don't know, maybe this is cultural, maybe this is me trying to prove something, but I enjoy working on like projects and doing this and that, like more maintenance related type things. I'm not necessarily a detail person, and I don't naturally find that like very meaningful. But a common practice I'll do is I'll actually think like, okay, I'm going to do this, actually this action right now. I'm going to approach this as like an act of like love, basically. Like I'm going to say like, I'm going to just approach this with as much love as I can. It could be towards like my family. It could be towards my wife. I'm just holding that in my head. Whole thing gets transformed, because all of a sudden it's not just this task of like, I wish I didn't have to do this. It's an opportunity for something, right? And meaning is like, you want to talk about fuel. It's like meaning is the fuel that like drives our life, right? Like the psychologist, I think it was Carl Jung, he said, he's like, man can't live without meaning. Like, which sounds dramatic, but I really do believe that's true. We find ways to create meaning, but meaning, like, we need to have a reason for being, right? We need to know that it matters. Like what we're doing matters. And if it doesn't matter, then we silently hate ourselves that we're doing it, or we resent life that it's making us do it. But life has tasks that we might not naturally feel like we see the meaning in or we want to do. If you can transform those things down to the smallest things, you can actually pervade every single moment with meaning. And that is really, really powerful. The other piece is, and this is the kind of a correlating example, but I mean, say I need to go and answer emails, right? And there's the whole meaning piece that I could approach it with. But another thing I could do is say like, all right, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to really work on improving my ability to like focus mentally, right? So I'm going to be running the majority of my like brain CPU on this task at hand, problem solving, writing the stuff up. But I'm also going to have kind of like a little counter or something running, like a little low processing power app that's also going to kind of be focusing on like, okay, how am I going to be able to like stay focused during this? And I'm having that in the back of my mind the whole time. How can I stay focused on this, right? Or how can I keep on maintaining this practice, right? Of like, all right, I'm not going to go and like open up a couple more like tabs. I'm not going to go and look at Wikipedia about something that just gets impulsive. I'm going to write it down. And it doesn't have to just be that, right? It doesn't just have to be focus. I mean, you could do, like, I could be approaching this call right now and be practicing, all right, I want to be really present. I know I get maybe in my head when I'm doing these sorts of things, and maybe I stop like engaging. Maybe a problem I have is I stop seeing the person, right? The person in front of me, I'm not seeing. I go to meetings. I hate being there. It feels like a waste of time. Maybe it actually is a waste of time. Like objectively, it's a waste of time. The meeting shouldn't exist, but it still could actually be really useful for you. What could you practice? You could practice like really like being cued in to like what's going on for people, right? Trying to understand like this person's saying this, but that's not really what they mean, right? You spend an hour doing that. I mean, that's pretty close to a game. Like that's it's like there's actually a fun, there's a challenge to it. There's something you're gaining from it. And this would normally be an hour of time that's just a complete waste. And now it's not, right? Or you're trying to go and do something and you're like, I'm just going to go and I'm going to really try and see this person, because I know that if I habitually do this, it's going to change how I do everything, right? I'm going to start seeing my wife differently. I'm going to see my kids differently. And you don't need to go and carve out all these additional times to improve those things, because life's already full every day of whatever it is, 16 hours of opportunities to go in and work on things. And it doesn't actually cost anything. It doesn't cost time. You know what I'm saying? It's already there. And we're just kind of wasting it because we're sitting back, you know?
Steven, I'm with you on hating dishes. I feel like there are certain tasks. I mean, I love some of the practical connection there, because there are just some things that I just don't feel is appreciated, right? And it's worse than cleaning up your house and you got small children, or getting to a place where the kitchen sink is clear of dishes, and boom, your teenage kid comes home from school, and then there went that, right? But I mean, I think that having the cognition, right? Because what you just did was basically kind of let us in on the thinking behind your thinking, and having the ability to attack life like that is intentionality that is just, I think it's rare in 2021, right? And I think it needs to be almost like a workout, right? I mean, I think it almost needs to be like, you said crutch, right? You mentioned how the monk manual is a crutch for your weaknesses. And I can appreciate that, because I feel like the monk manual provides me some intentional exercising of muscles that I just don't work out on a regular basis. You know, and I think that pieces in there, and I consider myself to be a pretty intentional person, right? I mean, Tyler and I, we do this thing. We're intentionally carving out time and sitting down and talking to people that we admire and trying to figure out, like, okay, how can I do better? How can I be better? I love your x-axis, y-axis idea with doing and being. I just want to thank you for the work that you've done. I am curious as a fan of your work, like where it came from, and how it came to exist in this form, right? Did you have some prototyping that you were doing? Did you craft up some notebooks on your own that you were doing before it became something that was marketable, right? Like what did that look like before? What did the monk manual look like before it was actually the monk manual?
Yeah, I mean, this might sound like I'm making this up. I'm not making this up. I started coming to, as I was saying, like a lot of insights around what seemed to be a path, right? I guess I was seeing the reason I get so excited about this stuff is it's like, I don't know. I mean, I imagine you can sense like I'm pretty passionate about this, right? And the reason is because it's like I feel like and I felt like I was discovering something where I'm like, man, this is really good. Like this is some really good, and not only good, but it's important, and it feels like it's like, I don't know. It'd be like if somebody found like a coronavirus vaccine, like lying in the street somewhere, right? Like they had a map, right? They were looking, but they just found it, right? I mean, that's kind of what it felt like. And so then when I was going to go and practically apply it, what I was trying to do is say, okay, monks have a system of life that's largely composed of, in many ways, it's like order, it's rituals, it's habits, tied with community. And I was thinking to myself, I don't feel like at the time I could really address the communal aspect. I'm still not really sure how you do that, right? Because there is something to be said around the people who are around you, around relationships, around the modeling that takes place. And I didn't feel like I could necessarily take that on, but I did feel like it would be really interesting to say, how do you take this system of life lived by monks and to mirror the function of their life with a different form, specifically for people who are in a more dynamic environment, right? So we're dealing with different things every single day. There's a lot more variables, I guess you could say, for people living in the world. And so my thought was, whereas someone could maybe set a rule of life for an order and then kind of not set it and forget it. These things do change over time, but largely it's like they were very intentional. They set up a system and they said, okay, go. And if you want to join this system, you can. But for us, like living in a dynamic world, it doesn't really work like that, because every single day the circumstances are different. So to reach the same level of intentionality, I felt like I needed to just create some level of scaffolding that could be flexible enough, that could work with a lot of different life circumstances, but clear enough that providing the right level of structure that could allow someone to mirror some of the same like processes of these like daily rhythms and ways of engaging time. So I started, there was a pretty long research phase, trying to understand a lot of different things. Coming out of that, I actually put together like a bank. So I had some thoughts of what to include on different pages, but I had a lot of different prompts, and I went through and I took the prompts and I'd map some different things out, and I'd kind of start winnowing away and trying to figure out this thing, that thing. And there was a pretty long process in there where I was really struggling to figure out what I was going to include. So I knew I was going to serve a pretty diverse audience, not only in terms of maybe like, I don't want to say ideology, because I don't even think most of the monk manual users are quote unquote like ideological. I think they tend to be fairly nuanced, I guess you could say. But I didn't know that there was going to be a very large like political, spiritual spectrum, but also like a life circumstances spectrum, right? So it's like, what do you do if a retired firefighter is using this versus a professor versus a young professional at their first job versus a busy working mom or a busy stay-at-home mom, right? It's like, how do you go and do that? And then also, like, what do people want? Like, then there's a whole nother level of like, some people are like, I just want to get stuff done. Like, I see this even today. Some people are like, someone left a comment last week where they're like, I don't like all this like reflective whamby-pamby like BS. They actually wrote this as a review. They're like, maybe it works for someone else or something, right? And there's people who are like that. And then there's other people who are like, I wish there was more space for journaling, because I just really want to be able to, you know what I mean? So it's like everyone's coming from a different place. So I was really torn, because I was like, what do people really want? You know what I mean? I was approaching it in some ways. This is like kind of the reverse of approaching things as gifts. So like if one question is like, what do I want? That's one way of living life. Another way of living life is, what does everyone else want? And that's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about like the gift thing, right? Because then you're just kind of like you're building the life for everyone else. And it's just a fool's errand, because it's never going to work. And you're, I think, miserable. So the gift thing is like, I'm going to try and just become aware and apply what I can to the best of my ability. And that could be a whole nother conversation. I'm going down a tangent here. What I did is I was really struggling, because I wasn't sure where to, what to include, what not to. I didn't have peace about it. And I would say probably about a 3-week period was going by where I was just really struggling, working on it at night, on weekends. And then what ended up happening was one night, I was just feeling like really kind of upset and in some ways almost anxious about the fact that I didn't know what to do. I didn't have clarity around what to include. And then I sat back and I thought, well, what if I just made this for my son? And I just thought, okay, if my son was going to be a young adult or an adult, what would I want to give him as like a tool to help him achieve that which I think like I'm trying to help someone achieve? And then I had total clarity as to what to include. And I walked away from that feeling like, man, somehow like love clarified things for me in that. But then also I have such high confidence in some ways in the monk manual, because it's like, I don't know. It's funny. I haven't really changed much in 3 years. And it's because I really think like everything that I ended up including was what was supposed to be in there. And it's just, and I think it's because it came from this place where it was steeped in, it was approached like the right way, you know, it was the purpose was correct. And so just, I mean, from there, I ended up printing out some different templates. I had a 3-ring binder. I started just using these pages in a 3-ring binder, changing some different stuff. Had some other people do some beta tests with it. And then the last step was really working on the language. So I was really, I want to be really intentional about the language. Like some of the prompts were originally worded a bit differently, but language I think is really important. So the last thing was kind of a final look at the language. Then design and everything else kind of went from there.
Well, it's a treasure. It's a treasure for me, and I've actually thoroughly enjoyed every minute that I've spent talking to you tonight. And, because really, in the end, that's what life is made up of, right? We talk about those moments, and rich man, poor man, you got 24 hours, and when we have a tool like the Monk Manual that allows Tyler and I to maybe take full advantage of those minutes, try to make the most out of the time that we have. By golly, we're gonna use our little megaphone called the Richest Men in Town podcast, and we're gonna make some noise about it. And so, Stephen, I've loved having you, and
Amen.
we circle back. We've been at this for a couple of hours, and we circle back with all of our guests with that question, right? That signature question. What does it mean to you as you think about everything that you believe life to be? What does it mean to you to be considered the richest man in town?
You know what? I actually, this wasn't pre-rehearsed, and so I'm just kicking it off the top of my head. I actually think that for me to be the richest man in town, or my vision of that is life is full of so much love, right? Like there's actually, if we can actually see, I know I was talking about the beauty, I was talking about this and that, but it's like really when you get down to it, it's like there's just so much love that's like actually there. Love's a weird word for men, I think, it can feel maybe soft or something. So if you can resist those feelings of feeling soft and say, all right, that which is just good, like there's this like that's surrounding me like all the time, like that's always there, and to see that and to allow that to actually permeate me, that's being the richest man in town.
I love that answer, Stephen. And it's like Mike said, I mean, it's hard to believe that we've been, at least for me, that we've been at it for a couple hours. I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I'm certainly richer for our conversation tonight. I appreciate what you've shared tonight. I appreciate what you're doing. I know that Mike and I are, we're all in on what you're doing. We're believers, and we've got a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are excited about the work that you're doing as well. So we appreciate you carving out some time in a different time zone and staying up late with us tonight. But it's been great. We really do appreciate what you're doing.
Hey, Stephen, how can people connect with your work?
Sure. So if you go to monkmanual.com, that's our main website. Probably our biggest social presence would be on Instagram, which is @monkmanual. So you can connect with us in either of those places. We got a lot of other stuff. The thing is the Monk Manual actually, in its form as this 90-day planner, it's really it's like a first step towards a bigger thing, right? There's so much in this space, not from a standpoint of, hey, there's all these things that can be sold or this or that. I'm saying like there is, I'm living this, right? Like I'm living and breathing this, like I'm walking this path. And as I'm walking this path, I'm really serious about trying to pour back. I just want to transform as many people's lives, right? So if you're not feeling like the Monk Manual is maybe the right fit for you right now, stay tuned, sign up for our email list, whatever that might be. Just get connected with us because there's going to be a lot more coming down the pipeline. And then also, I just want to give a shout out to everyone in Ireland, and I'm excited to see you. I'm just hoping that you guys don't break our servers as you fly in later tonight.
On the Monk Manual note, I do want to put a shout out there for your being and doing course as well. Tyler participated in that, and I think that's a great resource. So again, we're not out there selling Monk Manuals. Of course, we are huge fans of the Monk Manual as a tool, but even the being and doing course really kind of opens your eyes to some of the principles that make this life worth living. And really, that's what we're trying to get at with our listeners with this work. So, Stephen, thank you so much. And again, I just want to echo what Tyler was saying. I know that this was time. This was time that you had to take away from something. And so, thank those in your life that we just stole 2 hours from, because I think it's worth it. I think our listeners will get a lot out of it.
Yeah, thank you both. This was wonderful.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephen. Have a good night.
All right. You too.
my big brother George, the richest man in town.